Hi everyone, welcome to episode 2 of our Workplace Mental Health podcast. I'm Marsha and I have Aryan and Sinatra here with me again. And today, we're trying to keep it short this time. We are going to be discussing papers 5 and 6. So Aryan and Sinatra's last 2 papers of their research series. Okay, so how are you guys?
Good.
Great. Yeah.
Good.
Thanks for asking. How are you?
I'm okay.
You're the
End
one
of the
getting
year.
married.
Yeah,
I'm okay.
Marsha's getting married in 2 weeks.
I'm getting
Everyone.
married. I'm getting married.
Yeah. So,
Okay.
in 2 weeks. So busy.
Yeah.
Busy. It has been I wouldn't say I'm stressed, but it's been a mood.
Yeah. But your mental health is not affected.
I don't think it is.
Okay.
Not yet.
Is that good or bad?
No idea. I have
So
no
a lot of people
idea.
have like pre-wedding.
I know, right?
jitters Or whatever it is.
I'm not sure why people keep asking me if I'm stressed, and that makes me a bit stressed.
Okay.
Just the thought of that.
The people
Okay.
asking and actually kind of triggering.
Yes, so that kind of makes me feel like, should I be stressed?
See.
Should I be stressed? But okay, so going back into the papers. So papers 5 and 6, the first paper is called Disconnection in the Workplace, right? So why don't we go into paper 5 first, and then we'll go into paper 6 later. So paper 5 talks about disconnections in the workplace, how different designations and different generations perceive workplace mental health. And paper 6 talks about mental health solutions and moving forward. So why don't we go into paper 5 first? So disconnection in the workplace, why don't you guys give a general overview of what this paper entails?
Okay, so as you mentioned previously, so this is a 6-part report, right, on workplace mental health in Malaysia. So for episode 1, we pretty much shared some insights from the first 4 papers, more or less an overview of our survey findings, as well as the different perceptions that different designations have, from senior leaders to middle management and Gen Zs. So paper 5 is where we really sort of cross-reference what the perspectives of the 3 designations are. And we pretty much came to the conclusion that disconnections more or less occur in 4 different realms, right? So the first is when it comes to the first, I would say, is intergeneration, right? On issues from, for instance, work ethic, right? On their different understandings of social media and how that influences your perception of work and your mental health in the workplace. The second we looked at was Workplace culture. Okay. The third we looked at was
Policies, benefits and support services.
Yeah, benefits and support services. And the last bit was probably the most surprising, which was gender. So gender came up that previously did not come up in any of our research before. So it was quite interesting to look at how gendered norms or gendered expectations in the workplace have an impact on employee mental health for both women and men. So generally, more or less, an overview there. We just looked into each disconnection. We gave an overview. We provided a bit of analysis, more or less setting the scene for our 6th and final paper, which is solutions, I suppose, workable or feasible solutions that companies or organizations can start to implement.
I see.
Sinatra, you want to add on?
Any specific themes you want to?
I guess I think people would like to know more on the designations. I mean, okay, so how do intergenerational and interdesignation nuances contribute to the disconnection in the workplace?
Yeah. So the
question.
prevailing assumption out there is that there are differences between Gen Zs and non-Gen Zs, right? In terms of like the work ethic, attitude towards work, attitude towards money, job, etc. And it was sort of like captured in our multiple interviews with more by this stage almost 50 plus, right? I think 50 plus engagements thus far.
At least 50 plus, interviews.
And I would dare say that the majority of them accentuated this differences between Gen X, millennials, and Gen Zs, whom they portrayed have different sets of ethics and attitude towards work, basically. So that's that basically captures the first theme of our paper 5, which is intergenerational divide, right? But we also want to points out that this type of divide, it doesn't only occur in the realm of intergeneration, because we have to say that even within each generation have their own variations as well. So you cannot just say that being demanding or having different ethics is only a Gen Z problem, because even among
Or
millennials,
Gen Z trait,
because even among millennials, even Gen X, there are individuals of certain types who develop this type of like behavior as well, whether it's positive or not, right? So I think we need to caution against generalization against Gen Zs, because this type of problems also occur among different generations within different generations, right? So that's basically our main point about intergenerational divide, right? So I think the assumption is that, again, perhaps still tied to intergeneration, that those in the operations, basically the younger people, they demand more, but they're also more open to talk about mental health, right? Because it's like the trend at the moment. We spoke about this in episode 1. But apparently, according to our findings, the higher you are in the organization, the more open you are to talk about mental health. But it's just a simple majority. It's not an overwhelming majority. Even though later we also found out that there are tendencies among senior leaders to not admit that they have problems. Because it would be like to not be open about mental health, because it would be akin to admitting they have problems inside their organizations.
I see.
So this is some of the nuances that we saw in our engagements thus far. Yeah.
But that's interesting though. Because I feel like most of the time people talk about workplace, right? There'll be two sides to it. It's either Gen Zs and non-Gen Zs. And I think maybe we can go into specifically why is Gen Zs a huge topic in the workplace, just to ensure that, you know, maybe some Gen Zs would be a bit, you know, defensive about it. But I think it's because like you mentioned just now, social media, right? I think why Gen Zs are perceived as demanding or any negative connotation attached to Gen Zs is because they are more exposed, I would say, to social media, well, specifically LinkedIn, I would say. Because LinkedIn kind of shows what an organization should give their employees. So I think that's what Gen Zs would want to demand from their workplaces, right? But doesn't necessarily mean that Gen Zs or the other generations are in the wrong, because I feel like that's just how we know how to work here in Malaysia, right? Just to put that out there.
It's
Fair
part,
enough.
If I can add in 1 minute, it's part and parcel of the whole technological revolution, not only in Malaysia but the whole world. So social media is an invention of the technology, basically. So your generation happens to be born when there's so much technology out there. Like you consume so much information, so you're exposed to different types of realities, including mental health related situations, right? Whereas us, we grew, and even Gen X, they grew up with books and pencils, so they do not read what other people were going through in their times. It's not expected of them to develop some kind of like awareness towards mental health back then. So naturally, as one of our interviewees said, that naturally we just build our own resilience at work. Our own grit. We are not exposed to what other people are experiencing. So if I'm not exposed to that kind of realities, then why should I even complain about my work? Where I'm working, basically.
Do you think that, like you said, being exposed to different realities, right, because of the technological revolution and all that, do you think that contributes to addressing challenges in the workplace? Because Gen Zs are more exposed to the different realities, right? Whereas the previous generations might not be so much exposed to the realities, right? Do you think that might be a reason that some challenges are not really open to be discussed in the workplace?
So Gen Zs are more open to it just because social media normalize this type of conversations. I'll stop there. You have anything to add?
I think when it comes to social media, of course, so your generation, Masha, you guys grew up with it. You're definitely more well versed in it. But I think for people like me and Sinatra, millennials, we're very much sandwiched, right? So we understand a bit more about what the older generation, so Gen Xers and Boomers go through, just because they mentored us when we first started out at work. But because we then have to manage Gen Zs, we then have an understanding of what it is that you feel work or workplace
Or rather
culture
expect, right?
Yes.
should be. So for us, it's trying to find a balance of both, right? So and I think for millennials, it can be quite difficult. Millennials, and the assumption here is most of middle management would be our age, so
Millennials.
30s, right? Just because that's how your career trajectory sort of goes. So I think for us, it's also like if you want to talk about identity in the workplace, I think we're kind of like a big question mark, because you have to understand. So I have to understand Masha, the Gen Z, but I also have to sort of
The standards of Gen X and Boomers.
set by like senior leader Sinatra. You know what I mean? So for me, it's a bit of a tug of war. Sorry. So when it comes to solutions, it's then a no-brainer that the majority of managers that we spoke to say, look, it's a bit like I can't be expected to be this middle person, right? When I have my own KPIs.
Right.
And number two, actually, a lot of them have said that supporting employee well-being has become like a silent KPI. So it's there, but it's not officially counted as a
It's an expectation now.
Yeah, so it's just this assumption that you'll do it because, well, you have
to
people to mentor, and that's
because you have to juggle your team.
So
and it's not reflected in your gaji.
Correct.
Yeah, that's true.
So the majority of managers would say, yes, I really want workplace mental health training, and not only want, I need it.
Just to get it off their plate, right?
So if I'm expected to support or do my bit for employee well-being, I need to know what that entails, right? So when it comes to solutions, managers at the moment really prefer for it to be more externalized.
I see.
Which means a third-party provider until they can build those skills.
I see.
In the workplace, because actually when it comes to supporting employee well-being, it's not the senior leaders who would do it. If you think about how an organization is run, and if you think about how an organization is sort of divided, right? So senior leaders, it's more projection, right? So long-term thinking, right? It's more of culture,
business model,
employee branding,
strategy.
Right? Overall productivity. But when it comes to managers, so managers are they're more in tune with what happens every day. So the daily running of it,
right?
Because fresh graduates, operations, they are the ones who do daily, everyday tasks. So I suppose the different scopes of work then translates into the different responsibilities that you have when it comes to workplace mental health.
I see.
It's a very long-winded way of saying it, but yes.
I think long-winded is good because then people kind of understand more, right? But going back to, because you mentioned that some managers may prefer an external solution, right? So when it comes to addressing these mental health challenges, what do other designations prefer? Like, would it be internal or external?
I think you mentioned it, right? Senior leaders prefer it to be external.
Managers
prefer external.
Managers external. Actually, it's very interesting. So if I remember our facts correctly, I think 75% of those in operations, a big chunk being
internal
Gen Zs, so Marsha's generation, they prefer for solutions to be internal, meaning offered by the workplace.
By their bosses.
By their bosses. This is not to say that the boss is the cause of their workplace mental health stressor, but more like the boss is in a position to do something about it. Like, for instance, and we know what the stresses are for those in operations, right? We covered it in the last episode. It's things like tight deadlines, not enough guidance, crazy workload. So these are things to those in operations and Gen Zs that no external provider can help me resolve apart from my immediate supervisor. So that's the assumption. Okay, that is a whopping 75%, if I'm not mistaken, of survey respondents. Right. When it comes to managers,
75%.
so is it 75%?
Yeah.
Okay. Managers then.
Managers
75%. Sorry.
75. No, I think it's good that we are discussing this.
Then when it comes to senior leaders, I think it's 70%.
Yes, 71.
71% prefer both
External.
Yes.
External,
Both.
external and internal. So they see the value of providing both. And in that way, I think they also appease both types of groups, right? So they appease those in operations and they appease both those in management as well, right?
Yeah.
To have both types of solutions.
Yeah. Okay, so now that we're talking about solutions, maybe we can go straight into paper 6. So workplace mental health solutions and ways forward. That's the title of paper 6, right? What would be the general overview of that paper?
Do you want to go over your
So basically,
pyramid solution?
In paper 5, we capture where the gaps are, right? So we're trying to build a model on which we can provide some solutions for companies in Malaysia,
Right.
To provide solutions to their own employees,
Right.
when there are mental health related situations.
So internal
solutions, or even we'll mention some external solutions if they need it as well. Anyway, right? So we came up with this inverted pyramid model,
Right.
which basically is divided into 5 tiers. Tier 1 is the basics. Basically everything that has to do with leadership, bread and butter issues, the very basic of an organization. Tier 2 is communication and awareness of mental health awareness. Tier 3 is HR and workplace culture. Tier 4 is training and programs, right? Tier 5 is benefits and services. So our main argument for the whole inverted solution pyramid, even though it's inverted, is basically if you want to maximize your return of investment for everything that you provide for the bottom 2 tiers, which is training and programs as well as benefits and support services, you need to sort out everything at the top 3 tiers, which is the basics, your communication, mental health awareness, as well as HR and workplace culture.
Right.
Yeah. So we can go deeper as we move along in this discussion on each of these themes. So, but do you want to add at this point?
I'm happy with that.
Yeah.
That's a nice summary of it. Yeah.
Well, I'm interested to know more about the pyramid, but I think I want to go into the awareness bit, like you mentioned just now, because you highlighted awareness. So in the context of workplace mental health, considering the increased awareness because of the pandemic, right? Not only workplace mental health, but mental health as a general, as a whole. How does the level of literacy, because there's a difference between awareness and literacy, kind of.
Yeah.
So how does the level of literacy differ among staff in a company, and to what extent do they agree on the same solutions? Because we mentioned just now that some people prefer internal, some prefer external, and some prefer both. So based on your experience with your interviews and your discussions, do you see, or rather is there an agreement on a type of solution that staff would want to go towards?
Short answer is no, there isn't. Just because, firstly, as we've said, there is no consensus on, firstly, what the solutions are, right? And secondly, who should provide for it. Thus, the whole internal versus external solution debate that we sort of covered. But when it comes to the variation between awareness and literacy in general, awareness is there. Some will say that means, well, yes, of course, awareness is there because mental health in general has been a trendy topic. It's been trending since the pandemic. Which is not too long ago. So it's still somewhere up there in terms of what organizations are interested in, especially if we factor in ESG, right?
ESG
a lot of companies focus on that.
ESG and the SDG frameworks. Okay. So awareness is there, but when it comes to literacy, when it comes to understanding exactly what mental health is all about, perceptions differ. Not only between designations or generations, but also intra As in,
Right.
for instance, like Sinatra and I are both millennials, but his understanding of mental health can be very different to what I understand of it.
Right.
The baselines.
Yeah.
Right?
So these types of differences then make it difficult for senior leaders to implement or operationalize mental health policies,
I see.
because everyone agrees that it's important, but everyone doesn't agree on actually what it is, right? And if you can't come to a basic understanding of what it is, then how would you then come to a basic understanding of what the solutions should be,
Right.
let alone who should be
Providing it.
Yeah, correct. So awareness is high. Literacy is not so high, right? And then when it comes to solutions, then the debate gets even bigger.
Right.
So it's, awareness, literacy, and then when it comes to solutions, it's like starts the pyramid actually. If you think about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awareness is there, but literacy, that I think that varies. And I think on this whole concept of solutions, I think what people haven't discussed as much is responsibility. So what is your personal responsibility when it comes to your mental health,
I see.
and what should be
The company's responsibility.
yeah, right. Like for instance, for me, I mean, there. I think in mental health in general, for all of us, whether or not you are working, there is a certain type of empowerment that we need to feel when it comes to our mental health,
Accomplishments.
when it comes to our emotional resilience or emotional well-being, when it comes to physical health, when it comes to mental health, there is a certain number of things that we need to do on our own. Like if you were to go to a doctor, you get diagnosed with, I don't know, COVID, right? Let's say, right? COVID is one of those things where it's symptom-based, right? So they treat symptoms,
Yeah.
okay? They treat symptoms. But beyond that, there's also certain things that you need to do to make sure that you don't get it.
Prevention.
Like preventative measures.
Yeah.
That's why we had, for instance, the
Masks.
MCO,
Right.
right? So everyone was encouraged to get the jabs, stay at home, wear masks. What else did we do during COVID?
I forgot.
Yeah,
It's
you know,
not so
it
long
seems
ago.
like such a long time ago, and actually it's
It's
just
only
2
been
years
2 years.
ago.
Yeah, 2 years ago.
Right.
Yeah.
Social distancing, like how can I forget that term?
Oh,
Social
yes.
distancing. Okay. So those were like personal responsibilities,
Yes.
Yeah.
okay, versus what organizations had to equip
Yeah.
Yeah.
you
had to
with,
put in place.
which was, for
the
instance,
MCO.
Yeah.
a work from home arrangement
Oh yes, yes, yes.
Yeah.
to accommodate something beyond your control,
Yeah.
beyond you as an employee's
employee.
control.
Like, at the end of the day, business has to run, right?
Yeah, so that translates the same, I think, when it comes to workplace mental health. I think we need to carve it. So there are certain things that we need to do for ourselves, in generally for our own mental health, and then there are other things where I think the organization then plays a role in terms of making that self-responsibility or self-help a lot easier.
I see.
So, for instance, when we look at MNCs, when we look at companies with I suppose deeper wallets, right? Then you would expect benefits, support services. You would expect training. You would expect more awareness programs, and not just on 10th October World Mental Health Day, but
Throughout the whole year.
maybe once a quarter, something
Right.
like that, right?
Yeah.
We have that town halls. For
Yeah.
example.
So I think when it comes to this idea of solutions, I think it needs to be carved out. So there is a certain element that rests in our own control and a certain element that organizations need to do better at. But it's not completely on
The organization.
Yeah.
it's a two-way street. And I think that's the whole point of the title of our research series, building a community approach. So it's a sense of everyone can do it,
Yeah.
and everyone has their own responsibilities, so everyone needs to do their bit,
Yeah.
and vice versa.
Okay.
And the road towards that differs from one company to another. I think you captured that a bit.
In
Yeah.
episode 1, right?
Yeah. Again, we cannot generalize all Malaysian companies and put them all in one umbrella
Yeah.
because there are MNCs, there are MSMEs, and there are public sector as well. So you cannot
And startups.
Startups. You cannot
Yeah.
implement the same standard for all companies and offices in Malaysia. Okay? And then again, even within in Malaysia alone, there are industries that are harder to penetrate mental health conversations. As we've experienced in our engagements, for example, like can we say them?
Construction.
Advertising,
Yeah.
consultancy, and what else? Agriculture. Because we had this chat with an organizational psychologist who basically said the development is actually quite encouraging compared to pre-COVID, where companies in Malaysia just do not want to be associated with anything mental health at all. Right now, there's that awareness, but it's still very hard to penetrate some of these industries, like what we've mentioned just now. It's just the nature of the work, and it's just impossible to kind of like introduce some of the mental health standards to people whose line of work is completely not office based, for example.
Like construction.
Like construction, or people who work in plantation. Who just work every day to earn the basics.
Long hours.
More
long
labor
hours.
intensive.
Yeah.
Very,
Yeah.
So some of this that we've captured so far, somehow we still need to do more work to propel all this level of literacy. Because I think awareness is ongoing at the moment, like the awareness campaign. But literacy is tailored to specific industries and specific types of company is still something that has to be looked at as we move forward in 2024, for example.
And actually, just to mention, because you guys mentioned that term labor, right? Sinatra and I have also been discussing a benchmarking, right? So we've put out this series of 6 papers, and we're trying to sort of state what the workplace mental health landscape in Malaysia looks like, right? But often the question that we get is, so what's your benchmarking like?
Right.
So are there national standards when it comes to workplace mental health? And the short answer is no, there isn't. Okay. We looked at it locally, we looked at it regionally on an ASEAN level. Of course, there is when you look at Western countries, right? And what Western organizations are utilizing, when you look at what Western mental health service providers are providing. But for you to compare where we are at to them, obviously the gap is the gap is wide. So I think for organizations in Malaysia, for them to start thinking about what national standards on workplace mental health could look like, and what companies and I suppose what companies would be okay to sort of say, okay, yes, I pledge to do A, B, C, D, E. It doesn't have to be a very long thing, It's just something short and sweet, but just a criteria that companies agree to aspire towards. And we need companies to pioneer that sort of
movement.
Moving forward. So I think a next step for an organization like Green Ribbon, now that we've put out 6 papers on workplace mental health, that is something that we need to
venture into?
The
benchmarking criteria.
Yes, because like there's a place for it now.
Right.
There isn't a set of national standards. Mostly it would be on things like
The
occupational
OSHA.
as opposed to workplace mental health or mental health
In general.
it's more physical health, it's more occupational safety, but not mental health specifically. So that is where I think the workplace mental health landscape in Malaysia needs to sort of start shifting towards.
Okay.
Regionally too, so not just locally, but I think to be a regional champion of that would be quite interesting actually for the next few years.
Okay, so I think let's go into the tiers of your inverted pyramid of solutions, workplace mental health solutions, right? And well, to me personally, I think knowing how to talk or address, when it comes to addressing mental health challenges, right, it really just comes down into knowing how to speak about it, whether it be you yourself or companies talking to you, right? So I think that was tier 2 of your pyramid, right? So can you elaborate more a bit on what the communication tier entails?
I think one of the barriers that we encountered, but we found during our engagements is that companies would provide all sorts of solutions, create that open space or whatever, but the employees would not come forward to them.
Okay.
Because for fear of stigma, which is still prevailing in Malaysia. They are afraid that by coming to their bosses or HR, it would be put in their records that this employee A has has these problems and thus should not be promoted or
Repercussion concerns, I suppose, yeah.
And we encountered that a lot in our engagements. So I think how do you actually solve this type of solutions that you have to create an open space for people to come forward to you, but also ensure them that even if they do talk to you, it will not affect their performance or affect their career journey. Yes, definitely, or anything at all. Basically, you need to convince them that they can just come to you with their set of solutions, with their sets of problems, and you can just advise them on ways to move forward and just work on workable solutions instead of recording this employee's problem into an administrative file that can have some repercussions to their career down the line. So that's one of the problems that we encountered. And then Aryan, any other?
Yeah, and when we posed that to managers, it was sort of like, well, how do I create a safe space? So I think when it comes to communication and awareness, it's this issue of psychological safety, right? So what is it? There's three of us here. We may feel very differently about what the definition of psychological safety is, right? For me, psychological safety, if I think back to when we were working in a think tank, is if we were in a meeting room, we were discussing ideas, recommendations. Psychological safety for me would be having zero fear about just blurting out what I feel at that time. That's number one. Number two, having no fear about disagreeing with somebody in the room, whether it's my boss or a colleague or a teammate on a group project. That is psychological safety. Having no fear of asking for certain things because I need it at the time. Like, for instance, I'm just not in a very good headspace at the moment. I need 2 days off. It's that. But without fear of having repercussions or without fear of being misjudged or whatever it is. So that is psychological safety, right? So I think for managers is how do we create that psychologically safe space for instance, fresh graduates who have never worked before, venturing into a new, let's say, big office. You're trying to work with people who are older than you, the same fears that we had when we started, right? So how do we help you feel psychologically safe at work? But for managers also is, well, firstly, I don't feel psychologically safe also. There's also that nuance as well, right? Because mental health in the workplace is the experience of everyone, not just one designation or one generation. So to me, on this issue of communication and awareness is this idea of psychological safety and how everyone sort of plays a role in making that a bit more easier, right? And number two, I think when it comes to mental health, there is the assumption that conversations on mental health are incredibly difficult. So a lot of the types of training that managers in particular ask for is actually on the etiquette of speaking about mental health in the first place, right? So for instance, what are the words that I should be using, words or phrases that I shouldn't be using, right? What are the right questions to ask to encourage more sharing? So I want to know, for instance, Masha is struggling at work. I, as her manager, want to understand why she's struggling, but I also don't want to accuse her of not being up to par, right? Because I don't want to make her feel like she's not 100% when I already know that she isn't. You know what I mean? So how do I ask you that without sort of
making me feel bad?
Yeah. Because the point is, I want you to share instead of you sort of saying, "Oh, okay, sorry," and then the conversation just ends. When I actually want to understand more, right? So it's nuances like that, I think, that managers and senior leaders sort of like a wall goes up and it becomes a very I'm not sure what to say. I don't know what phrases to use. Or, did I make them feel worse about themselves by asking this question in the first place? So communication and awareness to me is more about just trying to make everyone comfortable, number one. And number two, trying to sort of get everyone to understand that speaking about mental health is not as scary as it seems. There are ways to go around it. And I think when it comes to a basic understanding of basic responsibilities, everyone should be able to have a very honest, open conversation on mental health in the workplace with each other, whether it's colleague to colleague, colleague to supervisor, colleague to director, or, more or less, I think that is the gist of it. And I think all companies should be able to sort of get that training out. It doesn't cost much. So when it comes to training and programs, that's a lot of dollars that you need to invest in, right? When it comes to benefits and support services also.
Yeah.
But when it comes to knowing how to talk about it, practice.
The other side of that, expanding on what you mentioned, I think we wrote somewhere in the report that while everyone likes to talk, not everyone can listen. And that's one of the skills.
Flip side is listening.
Yeah, and that's one of the skills that we think
Being able to
not only
listen.
managers but also basically employees of any echelon in one company should attend this type of maybe workshop or trainings programs of listening, because there's so much happening when someone talks to you, right? There's that textual language, but there's also subtextual from the way their gestures go or their facial expressions, and sometimes you need high emotional intelligence to be able to capture that.
Yeah.
But even if you don't have that, there are ways to figure things out, and you can learn all this from a specific like listening skills, or even basic communication skills. In that sense.
And the term communication skills and listening skills, they don't it's not a mental health skill per se, it's not. It's just, I suppose it's just what you need to improve on to be a better colleague, to be a better employee, to be a better employer before mental health even sort of comes in.
And that's basically our main argument here, that before you try to provide mental health solutions or benefits, these are the basic things that you need to address. Communication. Correct. Do you have a good communication with your employees?
Open communication channels.
Can your employees come to you without fear of repercussions? Do you actually practice a compassionate leadership? Or you just tembak everyone in your company and expect them to deliver while they are going through some personal problems, for example. So there are various types of the basics that we mentioned in the paper, that and that's our main argument, basically, that you need to address this first before you can talk about workplace mental health solutions.
That's true.
Essentially. Yeah.
Okay.
Alrighty.
If you would like to know more, Jay, if you'd like to know more about the tiers of this pyramid for supporting employee mental health, or if you'd like to know more about the disconnection in the workplace, or how different designations faces the challenges, or rather the challenges of different generations and designations, head on over to our LinkedIn, because our website is down at the moment.
Yes, thanks, Masha.
Highlights
Yep.
Head over to our LinkedIn to download the reports and have a read. I think if we were to go on and on about this topic, it would never end.
Yes. Shoot us some questions also. I think.
Yes.
I think we would like to sort of get your feedback and engage a bit more about what different organizations, different people on LinkedIn feel about our study. Because it's new, it's never been done before, so it'll be interesting to see what people
are saying about it. That's true.
Are saying about it. And if anyone is interested in, I suppose, a benchmarking or national standards, because I think that's a conversation that we need to get going.
Yeah.
That's true. I agree with that. So to conclude, when it comes to addressing workplace mental health challenges, I think one simple way, or not really simple, but rather one thing that companies should have in place is a psychologically safe space for employees to communicate their challenges, right? Not only the operational level, but just all levels in the company, right? Yeah.
Alrighty.
Well, thanks, y'all.
Thank you, Masha.
Thank you, Sinatra. Thank you, Sinatra.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.
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 Bye.